Well, Dr. Nakamura, I'd like to welcome you to our studios, and we'll be talking today, I think, about one of the most controversial and interesting topics that science has to offer us today. My first question is, I'd like to ask you exactly what are your thoughts on the drafting of legislation that's going on to regulate cloning, and specifically human cloning?
In short, I think it's reasonable to regulate the cloning of humans. Not all animals, but only humans. But I think it needs some explanation. First, I like to say that in biology, there are frequently gaps in the concerns of researchers and the concerns of society regarding the significance of novel technology in basic research. This is especially true in the case of cloning technology, I think. Indeed, cloning is a very interesting field of experiment in biology because it shows that the genome present in the nucleus of the body cell, such as heart cells or blood cells, even in the brain cells, possesses the capacity to produce whole body. The genome in the body cell has already developed only specific functions, but it can be returned to an egg and produce another whole body. I like to stress that cloning is not a passing fad. It is an important field of research that will enable us to understand the basis of life. Frankly speaking, researchers are interested in cloning, I think, but of mammalians, not humans. It's sufficient to know what happens in mouse or rats or rabbits. It's sufficient for us, not humans. So we don't want to clone humans for the basic research. However, human cloning immediately came to most people's mind when scientists successfully cloned a sheep. There were fears that somebody might try to clone the likes of Adolf Hitler. So there are so wide gaps between the laypersons and the researchers, I think.
Well, I think, throughout history, part of our literature is Frankenstein, creating a new human, and always not for the best of objectives or purposes. Now, if we actually use cloning, or you mentioned mainly for mammals, but what specifically are the actual benefits of cloning? Not talking about it just in a philosophical sense, but what practical benefits can be obtained from cloning?
There are many benefits, I think, but the cloning livestock, for instance, is one way in which this technology is being applied. For instance, the cloning of prime beef cattle or dairy cattle, pigs, and so on could lead to the mass production of high-quality meat and milk. And another example, recombinant DNA technology, could be used to incorporate human genes into sheep and other animals. And the cloning of such modified animals allow us to produce drugs such as hormones at low cost. Cloning of such modified animals also had a possibility to be used to create organs to transplant. Of course, we should be careful to transplant the organs of other animals because it may have some kind of pathogens. We must be careful, I think. But there are so many benefits concerning to the livestock, I think.
Well, now, you've mentioned here taking and using the genes of other animals and using them in humans. But still, people, as you said before, talk mainly about human cloning. What exactly is human cloning, and what potential problems are associated with it?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
I'm asking this is a very easy question to answer.
Yeah, but as I said in the beginning, it is desirable for legislation to ban the cloning of humans for the time being. We should have time to discuss what human cloning is, I think. However, we shouldn't react too emotionally to human cloning as something that is somehow repugnant. We need to understand what cloning actually means and make decisions once we have understood the implications of human cloning. I like to say that clones exist in nature. While clones are not the identical organisms, they possess an identical genome. Many microorganisms and cultured plants are clones. And even in humans, identical twins are clones. The identical twins live sometimes quite different lives each other. Yeah. So you can see that clones are never identical organisms. Even if someone tried to clone Hitler, that individual would think in terms of the 21st century in which he's raised. He will enjoy the computer games. Will grow up quite different person from Hitler, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, my gym actually. There's a set of twins, and they're identical, but they're very different.
Yeah, quite different.
At first, I only saw one, and I thought he dressed one way, and then I saw the other one, and I thought they were the same person. I thought he has a very strange fashion sense, broad fashion sense.
That's right.
But what are the actual conditions? Getting back to our topic here, under what conditions do you actually see people wanting to clone a human, or where it would be something that would be desirable to do?
It's also
another difficult.
Yeah. There must be some individuals who used to leave behind people with a genome which is exactly the same as his or her own genome. It will be wanting them to restrain such desires, I think. It's nonsense, I feel. And someone say that the parents who has lost their young boy or girl must hope to have his or her own clone. But I think we shouldn't entertain ideas of creating clones to take the place of deceased children. A cloned child would ultimately deny the existence of the previous child. It's not admitted to deny one's existence, no matter how short his or her life, I think. And besides, we shouldn't regard a new child, cloned child, simply as a proxy. It's tragedy for him or her, I think. Humans shouldn't be cloned according to such ideas. And another example, it will be difficult to deny requests from homosexual couples that wish to have children in whom they have genetic links. However, how will the cloned children view the fact that another person possessing exactly the same genome lives a life a few decades ahead of them? The requests are inadvisable, I think. There would be significance in convincing the relevant people about what they should not be doing. When we consider human cloning, we also consider these questions. So, what is human being? What sort of life should we lead? Yeah.
Well, that's more or less what I'd like to ask. Another one of these simple questions that I'd like to ask you. Because cloning is really not just a matter of science, it's a matter of religion, or what people often call bioethics. What type of ethical and philosophical questions do you think that we as humans need to be asking ourselves, specifically related to cloning? Another simple question.
So simple, isn't it? Yeah, as a biologist, I believe that every person lives as an individual, and each of us is unique. Of course, the genome, DNA, has influenced personality, yes. Some characters they have, but we shouldn't put too much weight on DNA. It is clear that the personality is a mixture of the nature and the nurture. There are all sorts of innate personality types by genome, I think, and also people vary in the way they respond to social stimuli. So it's a mixture here. So we have changed. I think we have to change the way of thinking for the living organisms. I think that the diversity is indispensable for the living organisms. They are not the machines, so they must be always diverse. I think it's very important.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our interview, but we've just come to the beginning of all the questions that still need to be asked. And I hope that maybe again we'll have an opportunity to talk about human cloning when it advances a little bit more in the future. Thank you very much for talking with us today.